"You don't live here anymore. You need to find somewhere else. By tomorrow." I froze in the doorway, still holding a bag of apples and a half-gallon of milk. My sister Olivia sat perfectly poised on the living room couch, arms crossed over a spotless white blouse, as if she were reading from a prepared script. Our mom was beside her, turning a teaspoon slowly in her tea, eyes locked on the hardwood floor like it held the answers to a question no one had asked. Nobody looked at me. No one asked me to sit. I set the groceries down. An apple rolled off the counter, hit the edge, and dropped to the floor with a quiet thud, barely audible, but it landed right in my chest. This was supposed to be my home, or at least what was left of one. But here's what they didn't know. I signed the ownership papers for this condo 8 months ago, and today they were about to learn exactly what that meant. I moved into the condo last October, after everything fell apart like dominoes. The contract work dried up. My long-term partner walked out with someone new. My savings vanished faster than I could adjust, so I called home, not to beg, just to ask if I could stay for a bit while I got back on my feet. My mom was hesitant. She said, "Olivia works from home most days, but if you keep things quiet, I guess it's fine." There was no warmth in her voice. "No, we're glad you're coming back." Just terms. The condo is in Midtown Toronto, 16th floor, white walls, glass balcony overlooking a park. My grandmother lived here for years. I used to spend every other Saturday walking through that park with her, holding her hand, trading stories. After she passed, Olivia and Mom moved in. I stayed away. I was working remotely, bouncing between short-term rentals, writing freelance content, translating research briefs, and ghostwriting education pieces. The work wasn't stable, but it was mine. Until it was. I asked if I could come home just for a while. No one met me at the door the day I moved in. Olivia handed me a sheet of paper. Shared living guidelines. 6 bullet points. No cooking after 9 p.m., no video calls in the living room. Keep the thermostat at or below 72 degrees F. No guests. Don't leave your laundry in the washer. $350 a month toward utilities. I didn't argue. I needed the time. I told myself I could handle it, but I hadn't realized something vital. In this house, I wasn't just temporary. I was inconvenient. An interruption, a variable Olivia didn't account for. Every morning, she passed me like I was a misplaced chair. Every night, Mom would say things like, "You ever thought about a more stable job, sweetheart?" And I'd smile and say, "I'm trying." They de-smile back. The kind of smile you give to someone who just doesn't get it. The thing about being unwanted is, you start to shrink, even when no one says the words out loud. It wasn't dramatic. Olivia didn't yell. My mother didn't slam doors, but there was a quiet system in place. One I was expected to fall into and disappear within. I'd spend hours at the public library applying to jobs, editing manuscripts, picking up contract gigs for indie bookstores, anything to pull my weight. But when I brought it up at dinner, Olivia would say, "Oh, so, marketing for books no one reads." I'd bite my tongue. Mom would follow with, "You know, you could always work at Olivia's firm, just as a receptionist to start." To start, as if that was a step up from what I was doing, as if their silence on my work was enough to declare it invalid. The rules got tighter. I started noticing Olivia tracking the thermostat. If it crept above 72, she'd knock on my door. "Emily, we're not heating the whole building just because you're cold." I had 2 sweaters on. My hands were numb. One night, I left a single bowl in the sink while rushing to a Zoom interview. I came back to a sticky note on the counter. "Dishes don't clean themselves." She could have just texted me, but that wasn't the point. It was never about the bowl. It was about control. I tried to laugh it off. I really did. But something was chipping away inside me, slow, steady. And then it happened. It was a Tuesday morning, overcast sky, quiet kitchen. I had just poured myself some tea. Olivia walked in, dressed like a courtroom was waiting for her. Black blazer, hair slicked back, folder in hand. She didn't sit. She just stood by the island counter, lips tight, voice flat. "We need to have a conversation." I braced. Mom and I have been discussing things. and it's clear this living situation isn't working anymore. I blinked. What? She pulled out the folder. Inside, a typed letter, a formal one. Consider this your 48-hour notice to vacate the premises. The word premises, like I was a squatter, a legal liability. Mom stepped in quietly behind her, placing her hand gently on Olivia's shoulder. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked between them, half in disbelief, half in heartbreak. "You're really doing this?" I asked, my voice small. "It's for everyone's peace," Olivia said. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just nodded, and turned to walk away. But in the back of my mind, something stirred. A voice, a memory, a moment from 2 years ago. "If anything ever happens," my grandmother had said, holding my hand in that final hospital week, "go to the second drawer in my old desk. There's a file, you'll know what to do." At the time, I thought she meant sentimental things. Letters, journals. I never imagined it might be legal. I never imagined it might be the one thing Olivia didn't know about. But suddenly, I remembered. And suddenly, I wasn't leaving. That night, I didn't pack a single bag. I waited until Olivia went to bed, her door clicked shut like a courtroom gavel, and slipped into my grandmother's old study. The room hadn't changed much since she passed. Books still lined the shelves. A tiny brass lamp still sat on the writing desk, and the same post-it notes with her looping cursive handwriting were still stuck to the wall. "Buy Jasmine tea. Call Marcus Green. Tell Emily she is more than enough." I opened the second drawer. At first, it looked like any other drawer: old bank statements, clipped coupons, a faded postcard from Montreal. But underneath a stack of Christmas cards was a thin beige folder labeled in sharp black ink. Unit 16B, co-ownership transfer, Emily C. My throat went dry. Inside was a formal agreement. Signed, witnessed, dated 8 months ago. My grandmother had transferred 40% ownership of the condo to me through a sealed provision in her estate, effective immediately upon her passing. It had never been contested, never revoked, never mentioned, because she didn't trust the rest of them to honor it. There was also a letter, handwritten. "Emily, this is not a gift of pity. It's a safeguard. I know how they see you. But I've also seen who you really are. If they ever try to erase you, let this paper remind them. You belong here. Love always. Nana." I didn't sleep. I just sat there, rereading that letter under the soft glow of the desk lamp, listening to the silence in the condo that I legally co-owned. The next morning, I took the folder and walked into an office I hadn't entered in nearly 2 years. Marcus Green and Associates. Marcus was my grandmother's longtime attorney, sharp, discreet, always in navy suits and never without a pocket square. He looked up from his desk and smiled as if he'd been waiting for this visit. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said. I handed him the folder. He reviewed the document slowly, carefully, like he was reading a verdict before announcing it. Then he looked up and said the words I didn't know I needed to hear. "Emily, you are a registered co-owner of Unit 16B Olivia, and your mother had no legal authority to issue a notice of removal. In fact, you could have them removed if necessary." I blinked, but I don't want to evict anyone. "Of course not," he said, leaning forward. "But I suggest we protect your rights. File the paperwork to formally register your stake with the housing board and notify all residents. Quietly, legally." I nodded. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. By the end of that week, Unit 16B had a new registered name on the deed. Emily Chen, co-owner. No one in the condo knew, but Olivia would soon receive a letter, hand-delivered, discreetly worded, with a copy of the updated property record attached. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to yell. I had what I needed. And for once, it was more than just words. 2 days later, Olivia found a white envelope on the kitchen counter. No return address. No dramatic stamp. Just her name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, a legal notification from Marcus Green and Associates. Title, Change of Ownership Record, Unit 16B. She read it once, then again, then looked up at me across the kitchen where I was quietly making tea. "What is this?" she asked, voice tight. I didn't look up right away, just stirred the honey in my mug calm. "It's exactly what it says. She slapped the paper on the counter. "This says you're a co-owner since last year." I nodded. 8 months ago, Nana filed it before she passed. Marcus made it official. I didn't think I'd need it until now. Her mouth opened, then shut. For the first time in forever, Olivia had nothing to say. My mom came in from the hallway just in time to hear the tale end. She picked up the paper, read it in silence. Her face didn't change, but she didn't defend Olivia. She didn't say, "This must be a mistake." She just sat down at the table. Quiet, maybe for once reflecting. I didn't gloat, I didn't smile. I simply turned, walked down the hallway, and opened the one room I hadn't touched since moving in. My grandmother's old bedroom. The bed was stripped. The closet full of boxes, the desk dusty but intact. I opened the windows, let the light in, and began to clean. It took 2 hours. By the end, the space smelled like lemon oil and dried lavender, the scent of her old hand cream and the wood polish she loved. I didn't move Olivia's things. I didn't ask for permission. I moved into my room, because I had every right to. That night, nobody said a word. Olivia barely touched her dinner. My mom didn't ask about my day, but the air had changed. Not angry, not confrontational, just different. Like a house realizing it had shifted slightly on its foundation and hadn't cracked. A week later, I placed a small brass nameplate on the desk. Emily Chen, writer. It wasn't for them. It was for me. The first real declaration of self-worth I'd allowed myself to make in years. And it sat on the same wood surface where Nana used to say, "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stop apologizing for taking up space." So I didn't apologize. Not that night. Not again. I didn't expect anything to change overnight. Olivia still moved through the condo like it belonged to her. My mother still measured her words around me, unsure whether to acknowledge what had happened or pretend it hadn't. But I no longer tiptoed. I no longer asked. And that alone changed everything. Each morning, I sat at my grandmother's old desk, now mine, and opened my laptop. The sun would hit the far window around 9:15, casting a soft golden square across the wood grain. I wrote, not for money, not for approval. I wrote for breath, about quiet power, about being erased, about what it feels like when the people who raised you look at you like a guest in your own bloodline. I posted one piece to a mid-sized literary blog. No expectations. A week later, I woke up to an email. "Your voice is beautiful. We'd love to feature this in our upcoming issue." The subject line read, "Accepted the art of being uninvited." I stared at it frozen, then smiled. Not the kind you post on social media. The kind you make alone when something lands deep and true. A few days after the piece went live, I found an envelope in my desk drawer. No stamp, no signature, just my name. In handwriting I hadn't seen since before Nana passed. It had been sealed inside the back of the drawer, taped under a shallow panel I had never noticed before. I opened it with trembling hands. It was short. "Emily, if you're reading this, you found the place that was always yours. Not the room, your place in the world. Don't let anyone talk you out of it again. You don't need their permission. Love you always. Nana." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because the piece was louder than the pain. That night, I lit one small candle on the windowsill. No celebration, just a quiet ritual for reclamation. Olivia hasn't tried to fight it. She hasn't apologized either. She did leave a sticky note on the fridge one morning that said, "Didn't know Nana did that. Guess she saw something we didn't." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Sometimes justice isn't a courtroom. It's a room where you were once unwelcome, and now you write your name on the wall. In silence, and you stay.